All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the October edition of the Memphis Astronomical Society General Meeting. We generally meet on the first Friday of every month and have several several topics related to astronomy or science in general or related science, but mostly astronomy. And this month we have a very special presentation in the space-related field by a project that's going on here at Rhodes College. We're excited to hear more about. Miss Ann will be up here in a little bit to talk about that. So the Memphis Astronomical Society is an educational society, not just an astronomy club, and we do try to present, make available services to the public to help educate people, young and old, about astronomy and related science. So there's opportunity to join our society. You can do so just because you want to come play with us when we drag out our telescopes, or you can do so because you want to support our ongoing community efforts to try to help educate our young people.
And it's cheap.
It's cheap, $25 a year, can't beat that at twice the price. So we have, you can go on our website, click on a couple of links and join our organization. I'm not sure that this slide is true anymore to the new website design. But in any case, it's still easy to do. We do a lot of outreach, and there's a form on our website if you would like the Memphis Astronomical Society to come to your school or whatever function you may have going on and do either a presentation about astronomy or do some observing. We'll bring telescopes, go online, fill out our form. We do the best we can to meet most of these requests. Sometimes there are more requests than we have volunteers to take care of, and sometimes the requests don't work out because they want us to do an observing session at 6 p.m. and it's not dark at 6 p.m. So the things we have to negotiate through, and the form. So I'm going to blow through this. Jeremy, by the way, our president, Jeremy, bailed on us this month. He's normally up here doing a much finer job of presenting this material than I do. So
you're doing good.
There you go, Jeremy. It's your fault. He'll have to do all the video. So this month we have some observing sessions coming up. Tomorrow night we have observing at Barton's, our dark sky site. That is, I think, pretty good chances of being clear tomorrow. So
yep.
If you should get an email, a go, no-go email tomorrow morning sometime saying whether that's on or not.
Let me add, AstroFlats is also available to members tomorrow night too. Okay.
So if you're a member of the Memphis Astronomical Society, we have a different dark sky site that is stricter rules about showing up and when you can leave and how you can leave without messing up somebody's astrophotography that's going on, and the lights and all kinds of things. So, but AstroFlats will have an event tomorrow night as well.
Is it darker?
On October 14th, next Saturday is going to be a big day. You'll start out the morning around here, roughly around 10 o'clock, with a partial solar eclipse. It is an annular eclipse. It won't be total anywhere, but you will be able to look at it with our solar eclipse glasses. Please take what you need and what you think you can give away and get into the hands of other people that might want to look at it and see a partial solar eclipse next Saturday morning. Saturday evening, there will be a star party, our semi-annual star party at Village Creek State Park over in Arkansas. That park puts on, advertises this event well. There's generally lots of people that come out to look through our telescopes, and we will need help with telescopes. If you have a telescope and want to bring it out and show people stuff at Village Creek State Park, please volunteer to do so. I will not be here. I will be in Ely, Nevada, chasing the solar eclipse. Then the following weekend, on October 21st, we will have one of our teach and observe sites where these are designed. We start early. We start before the sun goes down to allow people to I ought to stay in tow with the slides here. So the Village Creek Star Party, a lot of folks will get together at Delta Q Barbecue in Forest City. It's 6 o'clock, I think, before going out to Village Creek. Village Creek is about halfway between Forest City and Wynn. Well, it's a little more than halfway. It's this spot right here. Then on October 14th, the annular eclipse. Like I said, the moon's just not going to be quite big enough to cover up the entire sun. Does anybody know why that is? Because the moon is at its furthest away point in its orbit for around the Earth, so it's further away from us, appears a little smaller, and won't quite cover up the sun. Yeah, Ron.
Real quick question. You said this takes place next Saturday morning. What time?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
That's when, I think first contact is around 10 o'clock.
Or 9:30.
This is the path of annularity, where it will look a lot like this donut here. And this spot right here is where Jeremy Bellman and I will be. We are going to be working with a production crew. It's all funded by NASA and the Exploratorium Museum in San Francisco. The live satellite feed hooked up to my telescopes and one of Ann's telescopes will be broadcast. I think the Weather Channel has said they're going to be carrying it, and by next week, who knows who else is going to be. But it's a live feed of exactly what's going on in hydrogen alpha and white light filters. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And quite honestly, I'm really starting to get nervous. Well, the crap doesn't work this time. So anyway, oh yeah, okay, so here you go. Jeremy thought of this. First contact about 10:32 here in Memphis, 11:48 for maximum eclipse, and 1:33 for last contact. So like I said, take solar glasses, you can look at it, and if you can give some away, especially to some young folks or something, help yourself. Well, anybody interested, young or old. I don't need to be prejudiced like that. There they are. Okay, Arkansas Dark Sky Festival is also next weekend. So if you're going to be over around Bear Creek, I think, Arkansas.
Was that last month?
That was last month.
Last month.
September.
I'll be darned. Well, what's it doing in here? All right, this is your fault, Jeremy. All right. So here's the Learn to Use Your Telescope event. It is at Hinton Park on the 21st at 6:30, well before sunset. So you can come out, set up your telescope where we can see you and you can see us, and we can talk about whatever it is you need to know to help get you set up correctly, or whatever help you may need. This is designed for some of our more experienced people to be there to help you if you're not so experienced. So this is what these events are for. They're easy to get to, in Collierville, don't have to drive all the way out to an hour or so to get to a dark sky site, and still get pretty decent observing from that spot. So here's a couple of shots from recent events. So we've got new members. We have a passel of new members. I'd like to welcome Preeti. Okay, I'm gonna ruin this. Preeti Desai. I apologize for butchering the name. Is that person here? Okay, next up is, I'm not even gonna try. Kay Devani. So welcome to the Memphis Astronomical Society. I apologize for not figuring out how to pronounce your name. Jean Elliott, welcome. William Slack, welcome to the Memphis Astronomical Society. Janice Race, welcome. Is she here? Seen some email traffic with her. James Belts, welcome to the Memphis Astronomical Society.
He's on the screen.
Oh, there he is. Oh, cool. Welcome. All right. You know, this is an oddity, right? Because normally people join and then they don't show up for months. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Sean Bolton, welcome to the Memphis Astronomical Society. Evan Michael, welcome to the Memphis Astronomical Society. We have a monthly newsletter that is wonderfully published, excellent, and actually has, I mean, it doesn't just look good, it actually has some pretty good material in it. So, but we got a wonderful publisher guy who makes it look really nice. So, members only, got to join to get our newsletter. So, another benefit of membership. All right. So, next month, we're going to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Memphis Astronomical Society. Our plans at this point, weather permitting, are to be on the deck, the observatory deck on top of, what's that building called? Engineering building?
Rhodes Tower.
Rhodes Tower?
Physics building. And the date, you can't see it, it's not November 3rd, it's November 10th.
Oh, yeah. Ta-da! All right, November 10th, we'll be up there starting at 7 p.m. We will have food and drinks, mix and mingle, stories and fun. I don't think anybody's going to be wearing a lie detector, so come on, we'll have some, we'll tell some big stories. And hopefully get to know some of them. Let's see what else I got. Oh, we have swag. So we got a lot of cool stuff with our logo on it, and you can possess some of it yourself. There's a nice black T-shirt with the MassFits logo. The MassFits is, we have a subgroup of astrophotographers who have a monthly meeting to talk about how to process images and stuff, and those image files are called FITS files, like a JPG or something, but they're FITS. And then, of course, there's MASS, Memphis Astronomical Society. And it kind of sounds like the misfits that they are,
Yes.
so we call them MassFits. So there's that, our regular Memphis Astronomical Society logo, and you can get it on all kinds of stuff, caps and shirts and all sorts of things. All right, also coming up shortly, let's see, November, this next month. So next month we will accept and close nominations for the board of directors and officers for the Memphis Astronomical Society. At present, we're losing a couple of directors, and we'll need people to fill those spots. Jeremy has talked about, he's willing to put up with being president another year. I think we're going to need a new secretary. Fortunately, our treasurer is going to stick around and stay in that position. VP of observing is, I don't think we'd let him quit even if he wanted to.
No.
He's changed.
Or the VP of programs. So, like I said, we need a secretary and then some directors to fill the remaining positions. So please, listen, maybe I should just tell it like I got roped into Boy Scout leadership. It's only 1 hour a week. They didn't tell me it was 1 hour a week for each boy. It's but we meet one more time a month than this meeting, and we talk about what we're doing, what we've got to do next, what we need, the observing events we put on, that sort of thing. We try to do that planning. We can use some help. So please pitch in. You'll get a lot out of it, I promise.
We are open for nominations on all the positions, right?
But,
We are open for nominations
oh
on all
yeah,
the positions.
if you want to be president,
Yes.
stick your name in the hat.
Please.
Trust me. If you want one of these positions, you're welcome to run for anything. We'll entertain anything. We're really that loose. All right, we have the Memphis Astrophotography Focus Group. That's a play on words. If you're interested in astrophotography, sign up, get hooked up with our Memphis Astrophotography Focus Group. We have a dedicated Slack channel. We meet once a month and have topics of discussion, mostly about image processing, but there are other things, equipment and what have you. You can get into it with an iPhone and a Dobsonian, or a $10,000 mount and a $20,000 telescope and a $6,000 camera. Come on, whatever you got, we'll play. So there's that. Next meeting is the 18th.
Yeah, it will be 8 o'clock.
I'm sorry?
It'll be 8 o'clock versus 7.
Oh, okay, 8 o'clock this month.
Jeremy didn't know that.
Okay, thank you, sir. What's the topic this month?
We're doing the big amateur telescope project.
Oh, yeah.
And
Everybody's shooting the same thing. We're going to
everybody
take all the
thinks-
data
Yeah.
and collect it and try to process it as one.
And we also did a survey to figure out what our customers want and need and what time, what day of the week and what time we ought to meet. So we're going to kind of resolve that at that meeting.
Okay, all right. So if you don't like the meeting being on Wednesday nights, come to this meeting. All right. So, RHOK-SAT. This is a satellite that Rhodes College is going to put into orbit with NASA's help. And I'm not sure they're getting that much help from NASA there, but they are getting told how to do it. And it's been a lot of challenges, and I've had the enormous privilege of being able to work with them in some small ways on it. And it's just huge fun. And it's huge fun to see these young kids building this satellite. It's their project, they're doing it. And it's a lot of fun. So without further ado, Ann, you want to come up here? Is this your program? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rick. And I will just thank you again because Rick has come out to our building twice so far, teaching students how to solder. So it's a very important skill when you're building a satellite. So thank you, Rick.
Glad to do it. It's been my pleasure.
Move this out of the way. Don't know if there's a way to hide this. Hide video panel?
They can't see it.
Okay.
But it does show up.
So this is me.
It does show up.
And this is not our satellite, unfortunately. But I'm going to talk about this satellite project that has us very busy. And before I get too far into it, boy, that's unfortunate. There's no way to hide that, huh?
Oh, there it is. I forgot. Drag it down to the bottom, maybe.
Ah, that might work. Okay. So I thought I would just kind of explain how did I get here. And so I was thinking back to my childhood, and I'm the youngest of 8 children. And in a closet somewhere that once belonged to my older brother was this Sears and Roebuck telescope. It came in this big behemoth of a wooden case. And I've looked it up on eBay, and it's now called vintage, which makes me feel pretty old. But it had this really finicky wooden tripod, and it had these funky, like, spring controls that were on these springy levers. But I used to get this out after my oldest brother moved away. I'm the youngest, he was the oldest. So he moved out when I was like 10, and I was like, huh, he's not going to use it. So I would set it up in the backyard. And I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. We had terrible light pollution. So I could see Saturn and Jupiter and the moon. And that was about it. But I would spend hours in the summers, late nights, just staring at these planets, just thinking about astronomy and just getting really excited about astronomy. And then, oh, this is not clicking. Somewhere in middle school, Voyager went past the outer planets and took pictures of Saturn. And I think in 7th grade, my teacher received like a press pack from NASA, and she gave each student just a different piece of paper. And I got the one with the pictures of Saturn on it. And I was just mesmerized. And I put this little piece of cardboard with these photos on it on my bulletin board, and it stayed there through middle school. It stayed there through high school. I lived at home when I went to college. It stayed there through college. When I left college, it came with me to grad school, went right back up on my bulletin board, and I still have this thing. This picture has inspired me my entire life to think about astronomy. And also where I grew up was kind of an interesting place in terms of astronomy. So this is San Francisco. Here's the San Francisco Bay. And I grew up here in Santa Clara, California. So this is Silicon Valley is basically where, right in the middle of it. And here's the Sierra Nevada mountains. Yosemite is up here, right here. This is the San Joaquin Valley where all your vegetables are grown in California. But on the mountains between Santa Clara Valley and the San Joaquin Valley is Lick Observatory, this observatory here. This is run by the University of California at Berkeley, and it was always visible from my house. This is a shot of sort of the main drag of Santa Clara, and you could always see the domes. They were always there. At recess in grammar school, there were the domes everywhere. I drove to high school, there were the domes, or riding my bike to high school. I visited this place a couple of times. It's a really fascinating place to visit. They do a lot of really important science. This was one of the observatories that discovered the first extrasolar planets. So very fascinating work. There's a beautiful old scope inside the oldest dome. It was built in the time of horse and buggy. So the road to get from San Jose up to Lick Observatory is this switchback that has many, many, many turns, and a lot of people don't make it without getting car sick. It's a really curvy road, but it's a fun place to go and visit. When I first took my fiance home to visit my parents, we took a trip to Lick Observatory. That was so exciting to me. And Lick himself is actually buried. He's entombed under the main pier, which I found kind of creepy, but it's like, well, it's kind of a nice monument to him. So it was always there. It was always in my mind, astronomy, astronomy. But I was growing up in Silicon Valley, and everybody I knew was an engineer. I mean, it was the 80s, and the semiconductor industry was taking off. And I ended up going to the college in my hometown because I'm one of 8 kids and college is expensive. So I lived at home while I went to college. I went to Santa Clara University, which is a Jesuit college, has a California mission on the campus. Little did I know that they have an observatory. They have Ricard Observatory, and in the observatory, I know now, is a 22-foot long Alvin Clark telescope.
Wow.
That itself has a really interesting history. It came from Southern California, but the observatory that it was in, called Low Observatory, was destroyed in a windstorm. It sounds almost biblical, right? And then it was kept in storage by the California Rail Car Company because they owned the observatory until finally it was purchased by Santa Clara. However, when I was a student, this was locked up, and the only people who got in were the archaeologists who used the building for storage. So I was so close, but I was still so far away. Now it has since been renovated, and I think they did some interesting work for Comet Shoemaker-Levy when it slammed into Jupiter. They got some cool photos. But in the meantime, I was at college. I was kind of being swayed into the engineering type world because it was all around me. So I was studying engineering physics, which is basically you do everything a physics major does, and then let's just make you do everything an engineer does. So I did all those things. So I was pretty busy anyway. I didn't have a lot of time to do this. And then I went to graduate school at Washington University in St. Louis to pursue physics because I got really excited about physics research. And lo and behold, Washington University had an observatory on the top of the old physics building. This is Crow Hall, and they had this little observatory. This is the new physics building. So most graduate students start in the old building, and then when you get attached to a project, you get to move into the new building. But not all of us, but I did end up in that building. But they had this observatory. I was really excited. They have a little tiny 6-inch telescope in there. They're close to St. Louis, so tons of light pollution. It was such a letdown. So the only time I really went in the observatory was on the 4th of July. A bunch of graduate students would climb up here, and we would climb out on the roof to watch fireworks. That was actually my first date with my husband. We climbed out on the roof and watched fireworks. And oh yeah, there's a telescope. Oh well. So I was again so close, but yet so far from having an observatory. Well, now I'm so fortunate because I am here, and this is the physics building. It's just the building to the south of us, and we have an observatory, and I get to use it. This one I'm actually using. When I first came to Rhodes 25 years ago, we had 2 observatory domes. One of them had this behemoth in it. This was a near-infrared scope that actually used to ride around on the back of a tractor trailer, and they would go eclipse chasing with it. A couple of times they even shipped it to eclipse sites. This went on a ship to Alaska for an eclipse in the 60s. I think it may have even gone to Kenya for an eclipse. But eventually it ended up on a permanent mount in one of our domes. This is an old photo because I see a pipe here. This is Dr. Jack Taylor, and he was sort of the physics department in the 20th century. But I recognized that pipe the other day. I was like, oh, that's Dr. Taylor. This may have been the last student who ever used this telescope. I don't know. It never really worked right. It didn't track right. It just kind of sat there as a big white elephant. But it was kind of cool to look at. In the other dome, we had, I think this was a 12-inch, just a celestron, nice scope for teaching astronomy. It was not a go-to mount, so when I first got here, I had to learn how to star hop, and just finding Andromeda was really hard in our light-polluted skies, but we managed, and this is one of the last students to use this particular scope. But this is how I first met Mr. Rick Honey. When I got here, there were all kinds of drips on the backside of the corrector plate because someone had stored it in the wrong orientation and dew had condensed and dripped on the corrector plate. And so I called up Memphis Astro, and Rick came and he helped me take this apart. We cleaned it, we put it back together. It was really awesome, and that was long ago, but I think this scope is still working. It was donated to French Camp in Mississippi, so I think it's down there in use.
It is.
About maybe 8 years ago, we renovated the building. We got rid of the north dome, and we redid the south dome, and now this is what is inside. This is a 20-inch plane wave reflecting telescope with a really nice CCD camera. It's all computer controlled. I can even remote log in from home. So I finally have my dream. I have an observatory that I have access to, and I get to teach students how to use it, and it's really great fun. And a lot of people in this group have helped me. Even 3 years ago, I didn't know much about using this. Merrill is here, and he helped me a lot learn a lot of things about guiding and taking images and setting up things for this particular scope. Was a really big help. So I'm very grateful to this group. Okay, I should say as we get into this, if you have questions, just interrupt me. It's much more fun that way, and then I get a break from talking while you ask your question. So just holler out or ask your question.
I have an interesting story about the Near Infrared Telescope, that those solar eclipse chasing expeditions, as I recall, if the stories I've heard are correct, were paid for by the U.S. Department of Defense.
There were a lot of defense contracts back then, yeah.
And it turns out, we believe, based on speculation among some people that were involved in that they were trying to figure out how to keep heat-seeking missiles from chasing the sun and chasing the jet engines they were designed to go after.
Interesting.
How do you distinguish between them? So,
There are a lot of interesting stories about
There
the
are.
physics department in the middle of the 20th century. And unfortunately, one of the professors who was involved in this, I just learned he passed away today. So I'm glad I can include this picture.
Which one passed away?
Professor Jack Street.
Oh,
Yeah, it's very sad. He was a wonderful, wonderful person.
I knew his son.
Okay, so when astronomers think about satellites, this is probably what comes to mind. So these are images, and they're all marred by tracks from satellites. This is an image from the Hubble, and there's a track of a satellite in the image. So they probably just throw that one away. Here, these are both ground-based images, and you can just see all the different satellites. Starlink hasn't helped. Starlink is putting up a copious amount of satellites, and I'm sure some of you who take images have seen these satellite tracks in your images. There are tricks and there are ways that you can get rid of, the satellite tracks, but eventually it may become a bigger problem. But when some other people think about satellites, maybe an engineer, you might think about something like this. So this is Sputnik, the first satellite in 1957. All it did was beep, but it was a really important beep because it was the first man-made satellite. This orbited at about 340 miles, and it just had this 1-watt radio transmitter. You might think about like GPS satellites. So this is a standard GPS satellite, and this is a human here, this size. So they're very big. When it gets out in space, it unfurls its solar panels. So these usually orbit at a much higher altitude because they need to stay over the same point on the surface of the Earth, so about 12,000 miles. And they're many tons, right? 3,000 pounds. The Hubble Space Telescope is also a satellite. It's orbiting Earth. This was launched in 1990. It is orbiting at about 340 miles altitude, so the low-ish Earth orbit. And it costs $1.5 billion, well worth it. But when we started thinking satellite, we're like, gosh, they're really expensive. They're big, they're expensive. I don't know about this. So we were approached by an alum of the college, Dr. Charles Robertson. We're in Robertson Hall. And he said, hey, have you guys heard about CubeSats? Oh, we'll go back to that. So CubeSats are satellites for people who can't afford to do satellites. Because not only are they big and expensive to build, but you have to get them into orbit. And that's an expensive proposition. So CubeSats are small. This is a standard Rubik's Cube. I won a contest in 8th grade. I could solve it the fastest. But this is a CubeSat that is just a little bit bigger. It's exactly this size. This is just a 3D printed model so you can see the size of it, and I'll pass this around. But it's 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, and then one dimension is a little longer because it has feet on both sides, 11 centimeters. Thank you. So these are a class of what are called nano satellites because they're tiny, they're nano, and they're small scale, And they're only in space for a short term, so it's kind of like space science for the masses, right? And it started out at the University of California, or Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, as a way for colleges and graduate students to do space science. So the graduate students started making these small satellites, and it kind of became standardized, and you could do a CubeSat. And they come in different varieties. This is one that actually unfolds an antenna, and I just thought that the GIF was so cool. So once it's launched, it will unfold this antenna, and it makes this little dish. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But you can have different configurations. A 1U or 1 unit, that's the cube I'm passing around. But you could stack 2 cubes together or make it 3 cubes long. So you could have a 2U or a 3U. They go up to 6 and 12U. Here's a 3U satellite, and on this one you can see the antenna that kind of pop out once it's launched. We'll talk about how it gets launched in a minute. And so just to compare the size, this is a Starlink satellite. It's not particularly large, but its solar panel is extremely large. This is a human. This is a CubeSat. This is the little cube. This particular one they show has some extendable solar panels. Ours will not. Ours will be exactly the size of the cube going around. So when you're taking your astrophoto, it's likely this that is causing the streak in your image. This is not going to be visible. So don't get angry at me for adding to satellite noise in your images. Okay, so getting a satellite into orbit can be an expensive proposition, right? So here we have the Earth, and this yellow ring here shows the orbit of the International Space Station. We talk about the inclination angle, which is the angle from the equator. For the International Space Station, it's a little over 50 degrees. And as the space station or the satellite goes around, remember the Earth is rotating, so the satellite tends to trace out these paths over the surface of the Earth. And if you flatten out the Earth, the satellite would make a pass, and then it would come around again, maybe 90 minutes later. And so it covers a lot of ground. But getting it into space can be expensive. There's another example here, a polar orbit. You may hear that. It just goes up and down around the North and South Pole like this. You can also have retrograde orbits where the inclination angle is over 90 degrees, and they have some interesting properties. The International Space Station orbit is about 250 miles above the surface of the Earth, so that's considered a low Earth orbit. So satellites were expensive. They are, you've got to get them into space. So how are we going to do that? Well, we learned about something called the NASA CubeSat Launch Initiative. Well, I'll just leave that because I really can't do anything about it. So NASA has a program where schools, industries, institutes can apply for a free ride to space. So that brings the price tag way, way down. So now we've shrunk the size, and if we get this launch initiative thing, then we can get to space for free. So how this works is they send up CubeSats, they load them into these little boxes, and you can load them in any configuration. They try to fill up all the space, and they go on cargo resupply missions that are already going to the space station. They have extra space. So they put a couple of CubeSats in with all the M&Ms for the astronauts and whatever else they need. And they go into these modules, these modular deployers. Here's an example of a deployer. So these little square tubes are filled with CubeSats. And it's in the International Space Station. This astronaut is going to push it outside. It will connect to the outside of the space station, and then they just open the doors and out come the CubeSats. Here's another one down here, and I'm going to show you a video of some being deployed. Hopefully this will work. I should have prepared this ahead of time, but sorry, you get a free advertisement. Okay, so watch carefully. That's the end of the deployer. There it goes. That's it. So they're kind of spring-loaded. They open the door and they hit a button inside and it shoots it out. And you can have, 5 or 10 or however the configuration is can be launched on each mission. Oh, and that was RAMSat. Oh, here's another one. This might be RAMSat. But it's the same kind of thing. They get shot out. And so in order for this to work, you have to write a proposal and submit it to the NASA CubeSat Launch Initiative. If you're selected, you get the free ride to space. You also get help with coordinating the launch through a company called NanoRacks. They make these deployers and make sure that CubeSats get loaded properly and get up to the International Space Station. So that's what we decided to do. Like, okay, maybe we can do this. The alumni who brought this to our attention also gave us some money, not enough to pay for a big GPS satellite or to provide our own launch, but enough money to start the project. So we're like, okay, let's go for it. We have this generous gift from an alum, let's see if we can do it. So in the fall of 2019, we formed a team and we started trying to come up with ideas. So the thing is like, well, what do you want to study? We have this great opportunity to do space science. What are some ideas? What kind of questions do you want to answer? And so you can see a student here, she's really excited. And we were just filling up whiteboards with all kinds of crazy ideas. We said, no idea is stupid, we're going to write it on the board and we'll try and narrow it down. So I'll try to read some of them for you. We were thinking about propulsion ideas. This says solar sail, piezoelectric motor, space junk. There was one idea where we used, this says charged net. There was an idea that the CubeSat could eject a charged net that would then scoop up space junk, which I thought was really cool. Different kinds of heat shields, aerogel, heat shield. We were thinking about environmental things we could do about the Earth. So this says cloud density scan. Is there a way where we could learn about the cloud cover on Earth as our satellite is orbiting? Temperature scan, chlorophyll and algae scan. Is there a way where we could image greenness in the ocean and learn about algae? Rainforest recovery. This is right after there were those terrible fires in the rainforest. We thought, well, maybe we could monitor how quickly the rainforest is regrowing by measuring the greenness or something. So all kinds of interesting ones. There's a social science section here. This says tweets through space. So students had the idea, well, maybe we could make it like a repeater and you could send a tweet up to the satellite and then it would send your tweet with an addition like, you know, from space or something. So I love that idea, tweets through space. Listening in on general relativity. I'm not even sure what that means, but it was an idea. I'm not sure how we can do that. There's one here that says hard drive reaction wheels. So a computer hard drive has a wheel that spins very fast. And we thought, well, maybe you could use that wheel as a gyroscope to orient your satellite. This one got some traction, along with a couple of others, and I headed up this team where we were going to investigate this idea. So we actually went on eBay, we bought a bunch of old hard drive reaction wheels. We were learning how to program them with pulse width modulation, signals. And then it was spring 2020. That was fall break 2020, or spring break. So does anybody remember what happened? COVID hit. So everything got shut down. So no more reaction wheels. I remember the box arrived the day before spring break and we never came back. It was really sad. However, about 6 weeks before COVID hit, I had been to a conference at the University of Oklahoma. It was a conference for undergraduate women in physics, an excellent conference. I usually take some of my students every year. And they always give tours of all the cool laboratories, and one of them was a solar cell research laboratory. And we were touring, and the graduate student was telling us about, we're making new kinds of solar cells, and they should be really efficient, they would be good for space exploration. I was like, huh. So I asked him, do you want to put some in space? He's like, yeah. So a few phone calls later with his professor, we decided that they would provide these new kind of solar cells, and we would fly them on our CubeSat. Seemed like a match made in heaven. And so we settled on a 1-unit CubeSat. We had 2 goals. One was scientific, where we were going to evaluate the performance of these new kind of solar cells. And the usual orbit for a CubeSat is about 1 year. So we wanted to see if the harsh environment of an orbit where there's lots of ionizing radiation, does it destroy these solar cells? Which would mean they're not useful for space exploration. And then goal number 1 is actually educational. Rhodes does not have a school of engineering. We have a physics department and a computer science department and a math department and chemistry and biology, but no engineering. So we thought this would be a great way to give our students an experience in an engineering project. It seemed like a really bold move at the time, but it still does. But because we don't have any engineers on our staff. I majored in engineering physics, but I really studied physics. But sure, why not? So we did that. And then another part of it was to do some outreach to the Memphis community to get kids excited about space science for the future. So this is what went into our proposal. And believe it or not, NASA said yes. We were very excited. And so we had to name our satellite in order to submit it. So we took the RH from Rhodes and the OK from Oklahoma, and we put it together, RHOK-SAT, but it's not RHOK-SAT, it's RHOK-SAT, because we're in Memphis, so we call it RHOK-SAT. But a lot of people look at it and say RHOK-SAT or RHOK-SAT or something. But we actually had an art major design our logo. We're trying to get students from all different disciplines involved. This is to represent, elliptical orbit, Earth, got the little satellite. This is kind of looks like an antenna because we had to build a ground station so that we can talk to it. So I kind of like that design. Came out really well. So RHOK-SAT. So we submitted the proposal. We worked on the proposal all during COVID. It was submitted in the fall of 2020, and then spring 2021, we found out that we got it. We were one of 11, I think, granted that year. So we were really lucky, the only liberal arts college to receive the CubeSat initiative that year. One of my team members is here, and I know he said he had to go, but Damien is here. Raise your hand. Damien is currently working on this project. And maybe a picture of you. Damien joined a little bit after we found out that we got the proposal, but he is right in the throes of it right now. So we made the news. We were really excited. We had a cube-shaped cake. I mean, it was a great celebration. And then we're like, oh, we really have to do this now. Okay. So just like any good engineering project, we'll break it up and we'll into different groups. Try that. And so we have a team that works on the payload. There's Damien right there. That's his freshman picture. He's aged a little. Some of these students have already graduated. These three are the ones right now who are really working on it full time. Then we have a group of students who are working on flight software and communications. We have one student who was not a physics or a CS major. She was actually neuroscience, but she was really excited about the project. So she did all the Memphis outreach part, and she did some amazing work. And then we sort of have the grown-ups of the project, right? So this is Dr. Robertson, who was generous and gave us the money to start the project. Our project director here, Dr. Burnham. Our project manager, Jose Pastrana, who's actually a Rhodes graduate from 2020. Dr. Hoffmeister, me, a staff member in physics. We actually have a physics alum named Brad Hensley, who is a real aerospace engineer, and he's our consultant. And for a while we were meeting with him every single week, and he was basically telling our students how to think like systems engineers think. And it was a great help. He was just fantastic. This is a former project director who has moved on now. So it's a big group. People are coming, people are going. We developed a patch, and I try to put the last name of every single person who's been involved in this on this patch, which has gone onto some t-shirts, at least for now. Probably more later, depending how much the money lasts. Oops. Oh, and there is MAS's own Rick Honey. He gets a spot on here because he has come in 2 times to teach students how to solder so that the solders won't fall apart in space, which is really hard, and they're still working on it. But we appreciate your help. You brought all kinds of cool technology so the students could see where the heat was going when they were soldering. It was really helpful. And this is the guy who's going to be doing the final soldering for the actual spacecraft. Thank you, Mr. Honey. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the scientific mission. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on anything, but if you have a specific question, if I can answer it, I will. If not, I'll let Damien answer it, if he's still here. So the scientific mission, remember, we're going to test some new kind of solar cell. And solar cells that you might buy on Amazon are usually made out of silicon, but they're kind of this funky layered structure. So there's different, like a metal layer, and then there's like a protective layer on top. But the main physics of it is that you have a p-n junction. And if you're in electronics at all, you know what that is, but it's two different types of silicon. You sandwich it together. So two semiconductor materials, you sandwich it together. When light shines on it, you get a current. And silicon has been sort of the standard. And these types of silicon cells, if they're multicrystalline, the cheap ones that you get on Amazon, they're about 26% efficient, which means that only 26% of the energy that hits the solar cell gets converted into electrical energy. It seems pretty low. So how do you figure that out? Solar cell world says you do this experiment, which is pretty simple. You have voltage here and current here. So you change the voltage and you measure the current. Pretty simple. It's called an IV curve. And these different colors are just showing you if it were a cloudy day, your cell's performance might be something like this at various voltages. If it's a sunny day, your cell performance might be like this red curve. And current and voltage, if you take the product, you get power, so you can calculate the maximum power point. And so the idea is to do this experiment in space and see if the curves show any degradation with time. So do we lose the maximum power point, or do the cells stop providing current altogether after 3 months of being exposed to the radiation? So we want to do this experiment. It's pretty simple. An independent variable voltage and a dependent variable current. That's what we're going to do.
But with different materials?
Different materials. We're not using a solar cell. We're going to be using a special, the new kind of cell from Oklahoma. So what is that new kind of cell? It's called a perovskite. And the word perovskite is simply referring to the crystal structure, which is this weird looking thing. The ones we're using have an iodine like lattice, the blue ones. It's got some lead atoms in there. But then it has some organic material. It's carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen. So that's what's kind of new about these types of solar cells. They're organometallic materials. And it's basically the same kind of thing. You have a layered structure. Sun shines on one side, and you get a current flowing through the material, and you can use that as a solar cell. So these new type of cells are pretty exciting because they have now found a way, actually in a tandem cell, which combines a perovskite with silicon, they've hit 33%, which is really good. And they seem to be really good for low-light space exploration, like my old friend Saturn. Sunlight out there is pretty dim, so if you need power for a spacecraft, these might be the answer. However, the materials, it's very new. They still need testing and tweaking, and we're like, well, good, because that's what we're doing, a test, right? So this has year on the bottom and efficiency of the solar cell. In this first curve, these are traditional silicon solar cells. They've been creeping up. They kind of flatten out around 26% efficiency. There's been a little progress lately, but not a lot. So people think, well, maybe we've reached the limit for silicon as a solar cell. This curve, these two together, are perovskite cells. So it hasn't been long, about 2013, 10 years, they've gone from 16% efficiency, and now they're up to, like I said here, 33%. So there's a lot happening in this field of research. There's belief that you can fine-tune the material structure and composition, and who knows, we don't know what the limit is. So it's a very exciting field. NASA was kind of excited about our project because they're looking at these too for future solar cells in space. Okay, so our CubeSat has a configuration, and I don't have a show and tell for this yet. So remember, this is the little orange, the little green cube that's going around. So this fits in your hand, and it's mostly full of things that are necessary for the satellite to work. So this is an actual picture of our engineering model. This is like our practice model. This one won't go in space. That would be the flight model. But you first have to order an engineering model so you can learn how your satellite works. And you see it's just chock full of these printed circuit boards. And so at the bottom, there is our antenna system, and it has antenna that will pop out when it gets launched so that we can communicate with it. Then these long copper-colored coils here is called the magnetorquer board, but it basically uses a coil of wire to sense the Earth's magnetic field, and then you can cause a torque so that you can change the orientation of your CubeSat. This is not the best way to do that, and so this is used really just to detumble. If our satellite is rotating around really, really fast, we won't be able to collect any data. So it's designed to slow it down. Slow enough that the part of the CubeSat where our test cells are will go slow so that we can do a measurement when the sun is hitting them. Then we have the not so compact electrical power system, this section here. So basically battery storage. Then we have to be able to communicate, so we have a whole board dedicated as a transceiver. Then we have the brains, the onboard computer that runs all of the different systems. And then way at the top, that's where we can do our experiment. So that's the room we had for payload. And Damien knows how many millimeters? 17? No.
Yeah, around that.
So this is about 17 millimeters. And then just a few weeks ago, the company that's providing our flight model said, oh, we need to take 2 millimeters away because we need to decel. But they're so smart, they figured it out. They figured out a way to make it all fit. So we were able to say, okay. But that's it. You do science here. The rest is just to get the satellite into orbit, to keep it in orbit, to communicate with it, and to keep the experiment running.
Are the newer cells going to be helping double the power of the unit?
No.
No.
So 5 of the faces of the cube will have power generating cells, and they're silicon-based cells, and they will be on the 4 sides and the bottom. 1 face at the very top is going to hold our test solar cells. So we'll have 5 faces that can generate power, stored in the battery, and then our test cells are actually really small. We couldn't use them for power generation. Yeah.
Why did you choose 1 versus 1.5 cube?
Because they're very expensive. So in order to, some groups will build their own frame and all of its innards, but we'd never done it before. We do have a machine shop, which is great, but we thought the first time around, why don't we go to a company that provides the CubeSat bus, all this stuff. And 1U was affordable, and it seemed like we could do it. Although we still don't have our flight model. Anyway, we have our engineering model and happy students testing and doing great things. Fantastic. Okay, so designing the payload to fit in that very tiny section at the top has been a challenge, but Damien has been instrumental in making this work. But this is what our test solar cells look like. These are fingers of a glove. So it's a tiny little like glass slide. And on that glass slide, these kind of dark regions, that's the perovskite material. And there are 6 little like pixels of perovskite material on each slide. And then the rest are just contacts for electrical connection. So this is the interesting material. And then these are just gold contacts so we can connect electrically. Although that turns out to be quite a challenge. So on one little glass slide, which is maybe a centimeter on a side, 2 centimeters?
It's 1 inch by 1 inch.
What?
It's 1 inch by 1 inch.
Oh, 1 inch by 1 inch. So he knows, right, just like that. So we're actually going to have 6 of these slides, and each slide has 6 little perovskite samples on it. So we're going to take these 6 cells and we're going to put them onto what we call the pogo board, because perovskite material is very delicate and you can't make an electrical connection because it will diffuse into the perovskite material and destroy the material. So we're like, well, how are you going to connect to something if you can't solder? You can't use electrically conductive tape, although we really want to use some electrically conductive tape. We've been talking about that for years. So we had to come up with another way, and the way was to use a pogo board. And a pogo board is just a board that contains these little spring tension pins. So this is a pogo pin, and we're going to design this board in the back to have all these pins, and the pins will attach to the electrical connections. And they just touch it. That's all they do. They don't thermally bond or anything, they just make a contact, hopefully. So that's a pogo pin, and I think I do have a sample. So this is, if you've never seen a pogo pin, this is just a sample. There's some long pins on here. That's not the pogo pin. The pogo pins are the short little gold pins, and you can push on them, and you can feel that they're like a spring. You can push in and out. Thank you. I knew nothing about this when I started. I was taught by my students what a pogo pin was. It's like, okay, we're going to do that. That's great. And then the board that the solar cells are going to sit on looks something like this. That's this board on the back here. We had to learn how to design printed circuit boards and how to make all the electrical connections, and that's one of Damien's colleagues, Jasper, has taken over learning how to do this. We didn't know anything about that when we started, but I'll pass this around too. So those little pogo pins will be soldered onto the green board where all the holes are, and they will make contact for each cell on these gold contacts. So 6 pogo pins, 7, 8 pogo pins per perovskite slide. So that's great, but we needed some way to compress it so that the glass slides that hold the perovskites will be pushed onto the pogo pins. So we had to design a top plate that would sit on top and, oh, here it is, kind of squish everything together. So that H board that I'm passing around is the bottom, and then we have a top plate, and in between the two are the perovskite cells, so they get sandwiched. So we're making a perovskite sandwich, and this is what that top plate actually looks like. And, okay, so we need to make...
slots are all you get for the light?
These little circles are all we get for the sunlight to impinge. So there's one circle for each little pixel here.
Okay.
That's what these little holes are here.
Oh, cow.
So then we take the top plate, the pogo board, put the slides in between and sandwich it together. And that should hold the solar cells in place. We hope, we think. Problem was, we didn't know how to use our CNC machine, our CNC mill to do this. So this guy who recently graduated learned how to do it. He learned how, we got training on the CNC mill in our shop, which was a great gift, but it's just been kind of sitting idle. And he has made several top plates. So as long as we don't destroy them, we should be good to go. How many do we have, Damien?
We have 5.
We have 5, okay. So there's one here. Okay, I'll pass this around in a minute because I want to talk about one more part. Okay, so this top plate that I'm talking about is going to sit on the top of our, this is the payload section at the very top. And it's got a couple of extra holes in it. So these little 6 wells here, that's where our sample, our test solar cells are. Then in the center, we're going to put a reference cell, a copper indium gallium selenide. It's kind of a standard solar cell that is well characterized. So that kind of serves as our control. And then there's another hole here that is where sunlight will go in and it will hit something called the sun angle sensor. We want to make sure that the sun is shining on the surface with our test cells before we run the measurement. And if our satellite is just kind of tumbling around, we need a way to check. Is it time to take a measurement? So I'll talk about that in a minute. And then you can see here, someone asked about the power generating cells. All the other faces look like this, all around and on the bottom. And that's what generates power. So when it's all stacked together, it looks something like this. And this is where I'll kind of pass this around. So we've got the top plate, and on the bottom is the pogo board plate, and in between these two would be our test cells. There are no solar cells on here. I don't think, is there a 6 on here? No, okay. And then underneath we have another circuit board, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it kind of all sits together and makes our little, this is our payload, this is it.
All 17 millimeters.
All 17 millimeters minus 2 that they just took away from us.
I don't want to break this, how you get it back.
No, that's like a demonstration to, when we give talks like this, we pass it around.
But I don't open it, right? No.
You can, if you want to take it apart, it's fine. Okay, so the sun sensor was kind of a challenge because we had never done this before. So we want to make sure that we only collect data when our solar cells are facing the sun. It's seems pretty logical. So we have this little hole that will allow sunlight to go in, and it will hit a quad photodiode, which is right here next to a quarter, a tiny little electrical element, and it has 4 sections on it, and these are basically little solar cells. They're little pieces of silicon, and they will give you a voltage when light hits them. And by putting it in like an aperture here, we can actually measure the angle that the sun is impinging upon this and decide whether or not it's time to take a measurement. So you can do some math by measuring the voltage in each of the quads, and you can figure out the orientation of the satellite relative to a line between your satellite and the sun. And we decided that if the sun is within 70 degrees impingement on our surface with our test solar cells, then we'll take a measurement. So designing this sun sensor has been a challenge, but again, the students have done great. I don't know any of this. They figured all this out. This is Jess. She has now graduated. She's in graduate school in aerospace engineering. Okay, so when we put it all together, and this is the sandwich that I'm passing around, we had our top plate, and then below the top plate are the actual PV cell slides. Then we had the pogo pin board, which pushes the slides against the top plate. And then we have this other circuit board down here on which we have 8 microcontrollers that basically perform the experiment. They do the IV curves. And then the sun sensor kind of sits on this tower, and the sun will come through the hole and down this little aperture to the quad photodiode, and we can measure the sun angle. So that's our payload sandwich that I'm passing around. These microcontrollers, we actually were really fortunate to start a collaboration with a company in Los Angeles, an aerospace company. They designed a microcontroller that does exactly what we needed to do. And they were kind enough to give us enough for our experiment. And that connection came through an alum from Rhodes who works at this company. And he put us in touch with the CubeSat group at his company, and they said, sure, we'll let you have these AMUs, these microcontrollers. It's taken a while to get them and get them properly calibrated, but we got them. So they are here. So the idea is that when the sun angle is in the range, we'll do the experiment on each of the 6 in each of the 6 cells. So 36 little pixels. So we'll get 36 sets of IV data. And we'll also be recording the temperature of each cell. So next to each cell, Damien is figuring out how to apply a little temperature sensor. So we can also record the temperature at the time of the measurement. And then we just have to store the data, no problem. The CubeSat comes with 2 standard off-the-shelf SD cards. That's it. 2, at least there's redundancy. But when electronics go in space, there's a lot of radiation, and you don't know if things are going to last, but that's what we've got. So we'll store the data, and then the satellite will have to send that data down to the ground, and then we can keep it.
The SD cards aren't coming back.
No, the satellite will burn up on re-entry. It has to. That's a NASA requirement.
Are the cells all the same or with different mixes of material?
The perovskite cells are identical. Yeah. Yes?
So when the thing is tumbling and you're getting little notifications that you have this angle and then that angle and that angle, isn't there, I mean, it's going to continue to move, and it takes time for this message that says it's a certain angle to reach you. Meanwhile, it's moved.
Well, it
So
will do
then by
this.
the time you decide to do it, it's not there anymore.
We're not talking to it in real time. It's all autonomous. So it will measure the sun angle.
It knows how fast it's moving, so
Yeah.
it knows when it'll get back to that spot.
It knows exactly what the sun angle is. If it's within range, quick, take a measurement. And the measurement process is very quick, like on the order of half a second, milliseconds. So it'll check sun angle, take measurement, if it's appropriate, store data. And then a few minutes later, check sun angle, take data, store measurements. So we don't have any communication while that's happening. We can only get the data when it passes over our ground station and we downlink it. And we can only talk to it when it passes over our ground station and we talk to
No
it.
matter its orientation?
I'm sorry?
No matter its orientation?
No matter its orientation in communicating?
communicating.
Yeah, that won't matter.
Right.
Yeah. We'll talk about that at the end here. Okay, so in order to make this all happen, there's a lot of software involved. And I'm not going to get into the details because I'm not super involved in the software part because it's in my least favorite programming language. I don't want to do that. But we have a fantastic team from our computer science department that are working on the flight software, which is a multifaceted thing. The system for programming the satellite came with it, so they had to learn this pre-RTOS system. That's the operating system, and they had to learn all the applications, and there's multiple libraries for talking to different parts of the satellite. But there were a lot of requirements for them. They had to worry about having enough memory to store the data until it could be dumped down to Earth, and then you can maybe write over it, or do you want to keep it? I mean, lots of decisions have to be made. We have to be sure that we don't spend too much power and have our satellite die. So we have to constantly monitor the battery, and if we have enough power, then we can do a measurement. If we need to wait a while for the solar cells to collect light and recharge the battery, then we have to wait a while. So all these decisions have to be made. How to do the experiment, what's the exact order of operations. There has to be a budget for data so that we don't write over data we haven't downloaded. And then, this is a big one, you have to make sure that you can tolerate when things go wrong, right? Because what do they say? The fault is when the thing you never think of is the thing that goes wrong. So our team is thinking about every possible scenario. What if battery dies? What if 5 solar cells go out? What if, all these different scenarios, and trying to make sure that the satellite can recover. There's a part of the testing is called day in the life, where you basically have everything together and you let it do what it's going to do for a day, and you try to see if it can recover from any problems. And our software team talks a lot about bootloader. Basically, it was really hard for them to do this, but it's a way to keep the software safe when you're trying to update the software. You don't just want to install a new system, a new operating system that might not work. So you have to keep the old one while you also do an update. So it's really complicated stuff, but they're doing a fantastic job. All right, the last thing is communicating with this satellite. We're going to do all this great science, and we're learning about satellite operations. We want to be able to get the data and be able to check on the health of our satellite. So we actually are doing 2 different things. One is that we have built the main ground station, and if you look at Rhodes Tower, you'll see this big antenna on the roof that can track, and that's our main ground station antenna. And this is what the antenna system on our satellite looks like. So this is the CubeSat bottom face, and these little antennae, these monopole antennas, will just pop out upon launch, hopefully. A little bit after launch. You actually send a current to a little wire, and that wire burns, and then your satellite is supposed to open up, or your antenna, hopefully. Second thing we're doing is we are joining a global satellite tracking network that a lot of people in the US haven't heard of, called SatNogs. And it basically will allow us to use satellite stations from amateurs all over the globe to get data from our satellite. So in order to be part of the network, you have to build your own SatNog station. So we had to do this. This is the transceiver board, one side, and the other side that goes in the satellite in that stack of boards. So the main ground station has an antenna on our roof. So this is the physics building. Here's the observatory, fun, fun, fun. Here's the satellite, hard, hard work. But this is our antenna on the roof. We have a camera so we can see that it's operating properly. And we purchased the transceiver from our hardware provider because it makes encoding our data and decoding it a lot easier if you're using the same hardware. So it's a software-defined transceiver. It can do up to 120 watts in UHF. We'll be downlinking our data in the UHF region, and we'll be uplinking in VHF. So we will be listening here and transmitting on this frequency. And this is in the ham radio bands, so that people like Rick can actually listen in to our satellite and he can capture some data for us. Yeah. But that is what allows the SatNogs network to collect data, because it's in the ham radio bands.
Those green things on top of the building, are those the warheads?
These actually are vents for way down in the basement is neuroscience where they have animals. So they have a ventilation system. And unfortunately for the observatory, there's a lot of convection going on. So I don't look towards the north much. But we don't have control over that.
Is it typical to uplink on VHF?
This is pretty typical.
Yeah.
Some CubeSats will flip it and they'll do it the other way. There are other bands that, if you don't want to be on the public ham radio bands, you can use S-band or X-band. But you have to get an FCC license in order to do this. It's a ton of paperwork, which is why we have a project director who can keep tabs on all that. Yes?
The UHF band is quieter than VHF and takes less power. It's more direct. You can't have anything in the way. But so this little satellite, it will talk on the quieter, less noisy band, and you can uplink to it. You know, you can dump 100 watts on UVH. Of course, that's too much, but for this stuff. But they're probably talking about a 1 watt radio for the UHF downlink.
I think that sounds familiar. Yeah.
So,
So this is our transceiver. It came with this nice little server machine, but a signal would look something like this, frequency and amplitude here. And we've tested our ground station. We can track satellites just fine. We can talk to our satellite with it, which is a good thing, because that's what we want to do. So all is looking good. This is Kairos. He's a senior computer science major, typing in some commands to talk to the engineering model, which is behind him on the table. So then the second thing I said was we joined this global network of satellite trackers, which is pretty fun. I've been doing a lot of this, and this is a map, and all of the dots are people who have a SatNog station. So these are people who have built this little station, and they track satellites. And so there are a lot in Europe, particularly Eastern Europe, and it's starting to grow in the US. We're a dot, we're right there. We were an orange dot, but today I actually put us online, so we're actually a green dot now. But what's great about it is that once your station is online, you can then set up an observation on any other station. So if my station in Memphis is online, which it is now, I can set up an observation on this station in Australia. So if we know that RHOK-SAT is passing over Australia, I'll set up an observation. And that person will hopefully, or that station will hopefully get some data. This is what the data would look like on an observation. And if we provide to SatNogs our decoding scheme, then people can decode the data and it gets stored at SatNogs. So that's a way that we can get our data from people all over the world, not just when it passes over Memphis. We'll be doing that too, but this is going to help for times when it's not over Memphis. So our station is a very tiny, this is called an egg beater antenna. It's not a particularly strong antenna. I'm thinking about going up in size, but then you have to have an antenna that tracks, and that costs money. But our station is up and running, and it receives in UHF. And what's great about SatNogs is that if you own a satellite that you want people to track, you build a dashboard in SatNogs. And if you provide the decoding scheme, the data gets decoded and it will show up on your dashboard. So this is BD-SAT, which is a CubeSat from the Czech Republic. And its mission is testing a pressure sensor device for use in space and testing a supercapacitor to see if it can be used for memory. But this is just an example of a SatNog's dashboard. So it tells you all kinds of information. You get to design what data is downloaded and decoded from all these SatNog stations. So this is the battery current, the temperature. This one's pretty important, payload temperature. So they have a pretty stable temperature for their payload. There are, I mean, this scrolls down many graphs, but you can check on the health of your batteries, all the different temperatures. You could check on the sun sensor and what it's reading. So our computer science students are designing our dashboard. And so the health of our satellite will be kept on SatNogs, accessible to anyone, which is really cool.
you don't have to do that.
It's not hard. It's a Raspberry Pi in a box.
The egg beater antenna is probably the most expensive feature.
Several $100s for
They
that.
are.
So the last component that I haven't talked about yet is that outreach. I told you that one of the goals was to design an outreach project for the Memphis community to get them excited about science. And this is Jo Boff, who's now graduated and either was taking a gap year before med school, but she'll definitely go to med school. But she designed these little solar cell stations and then went into local high schools and taught students about solar energy. And I have one of her stations up here. It's pretty cool. She learned how to use a laser cutter and all kinds of cool stuff. But it's just some acrylic panels with 2 solar panels, and we've got labels. Students can connect some multimeters. And then we have lights, and they were looking at the effect of brightness on the measured current and voltage. We were looking at colored filters and how that affects the performance of the solar cell, and a variety of different parameters that we could alter just to help students learn about solar energy. They looked at parallel connections versus series connections, and it was a lot of fun. So that was one project. The other project is called Gravity Wells. So our outreach was solar cells and gravity wells. We purchased and constructed this giant spandex ring so that we could talk about space-time. And so with this, you can put a weight in it, and it's kind of like those things where you roll the penny and it goes around. But this is a piece of spandex, and you roll marbles around, and there are lots of different things you can demonstrate. And this was at Mosh for a STEAM Fest once. But this is kind of cool because we have 2 weights here, and you can actually do like the Apollo 8 orbits, where you start at Earth, go slingshot around the moon, come back to Earth. There's about 20 different things you can demonstrate. That kind of goes crazy here at the end. There's like 20 different things you can demonstrate how the solar system formed. You can demonstrate gravitational lensing of light due to mass. So we had a lot of fun with that, and she developed a full curriculum for this gravity well. Okay, so this was our calendar. It's gone through many iterations. So we started in the fall of 2019, and we got some planning going, but then COVID hit. So during COVID, we were writing the proposal, and we were also working on our ground station. That was one thing that we could do because it was kind of a solo kind of thing. So we did that. Then we found out we got the proposal in spring. We celebrated, yay. Then we had already purchased our engineering model. So when we finally got back to campus, we had our engineering model, and we could actually start developing the software, installing our sat-nav station, designing the payload. Now we're developing the payload and testing the payload. We did receive the solar cells that are going to fly. They're being stored carefully in a nitrogen glove box, so nothing happens to them. We've received our microcontrollers that will do the experiment that need to get soldered onto the board. What we're still waiting on is the actual flight model itself, the actual thing with the boards in it and the tiny little space for payload, because our supplier is located in the Netherlands, and they have had all kinds of supply chain delays, particularly with the silicon solar cells that will provide power. Last we heard, they got 3, and they're waiting on 2, right? We're waiting 2 more solar cells to come in, then they're gonna box it up and ship it to Memphis. Everything else is ready to go. So that should have happened by the end of September, but now it's October 6th and it's still not in the mail. So we're still waiting. Once we get it, we'll have a little bit of time to do our critical design review, where the students will have to present to a panel of engineers and people who are involved in CubeSats and make sure everything is good to go. Then we have a little bit of time to test the flight model. Our launch provider, NanoRacks, you have to have vibration testing and thermal testing. So NanoRacks actually pays for that, which is nice, and we'll probably go to either New Orleans or Huntsville, where those are their facilities. And if our flight model passes all the tests, we're good to go. If it doesn't pass, we got to fix the problem, do the testing again at our own expense, and repeat until we pass the test. So I'm hoping we'll pass the first time. Then, this is September next year, so about a year from now, hand off to NASA. Yay. And then we wait however long until the launch of the next cargo resupply mission. Right now they're telling us it'll probably be SpaceX CRS cargo resupply number 30, which is at the end of 2024, or maybe early 2025.
Cool.
So how did we pay for all this? So we have our favorite alum, Charlie Robertson. The NASA CubeSat launch initiative is giving us the launch for free, which is it's like $100,000 if you want to launch something, but NASA's providing it for free. We have had several consecutive years of grants from the Society of Physics Students, which is a sort of a professional society for undergraduate physics majors. And our students write these proposals, and they send it in, and they've been funded 4 years in a row. And then the Tennessee Space Grant Consortium has provided money for our big transceiver. It was a $15,000 purchase. And I think that's the end, yeah. So just kind of summing up, what kind of things are our students learning? I just put all the words I could think of. Engineering, signal processing, CAD design, photodiodes, radio operation, PCB design, problem solving, presentation skills. It's just a variety of things that our students are getting great experience with. You can't really get this just sitting in a classroom, right? You have to do a project with deadlines and problems that you don't know how to solve. And these are just a collection of photos of happy people who've done a lot of student presentations at different conferences. Our flight software team won an award in Knoxville last year for their presentation. And these are 3 of our recent graduates. Jess is now a graduate student in aerospace engineering at Huntsville. These 2, they had a job before they graduated as aerospace engineers. Ben is now living the good life in California, working for an aerospace company, and Olivia is in Colorado, working for an aerospace company. And we don't have an engineering school, and they're going and being engineers, so it's really a rewarding experience.
They learned all that before they got out of school, and it's taken me 50 years.
So that's the end. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
How long will those usually stay up?
About a year. So it kind of depends on how the height, altitude of the orbit. And at the ISS level, it's about a year, but we might get a little bit higher or a little bit lower.
That's enough to get through your day.
It's what?
That's enough to get some data.
It's definitely enough. And like I said, the satellite has to completely burn up on re-entry. They're very picky about what materials you use because nothing can get through. We don't want a titanium screw hitting you on the head or anything.
So no titanium?
No titanium, aluminum mostly, maybe a little brass and steel, and then PCB boards and things like that. Yes?
Is there any provisions to protect your satellite, like solar flares hitting toward Earth?
No, and actually we want that because we want these solar cells to experience the harsh environment of space. So we actually picked a really good time because the solar cycle is heating up. There's going to be a lot of solar activity, which is great for our science experiment, but it might be bad for our satellite electronics. It could fry something and then it's non-recoverable.
There is a Go ahead.
What's the total running cost so far?
I'm sorry?
What's the total running cost for the entire?
So the alumni gift was $500,000 for this, and that pays for the flight model, and the engineering model, a lot of salaries of people involved, and then we had the other monies, a few $20,000 on top of that. I don't know that the money's going to hold out until this project ends. We'll find a way. That's what you do.
Sell those t-shirts.
Sell t-shirts.
Yes. What's the expectation based on ground-based lab testing of these perovskites? Are they expected to be? We know that they're efficient. Do we expect them to be more or less durable than silicon?
So the real problem with perovskites is they're not durable. And at first we were told, perovskites can't handle humidity. That's a problem. Not in space, but it's going to sit on the launch pad probably for 6 months, right, waiting to get launched in Florida. So that's bad. But then, so these come from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and every week they're making new developments. And so our flight cells have a coating on them that is supposed to kind of mitigate the humidity problem. But we don't really know. There has been one CubeSat that flew perovskites. And it's actually still, the mission is ongoing, so we don't know yet. The ISS actually stuck some outside the International Space Station, and then they brought them back in and brought them back down for examination. But there haven't been any space tests, so we don't really know. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Don't forget your Eclipse classes.
I have